The dim lights of the Nexus Station cantina flickered as Vextal dragged his massive frame across the worn metal floor. His 3 remaining limbs moved with mechanical precision, while the empty sockets where his other appendages once were told their own silent story of battles fought and survived. The recycled air tasted of rust and old fuel, a familiar comfort that reminded him of countless warships across the galaxy. Young officers from 12 different species had gathered tonight, their curious eyes following the legendary Zephyrian commander as he settled into his usual corner booth. A crystalline lieutenant with translucent skin sat rigid with attention. 2 Vorthan cadets whispered excitedly to each other, their scaled heads bobbing with anticipation. Even a rare ethereal being had materialized, its energy form pulsing with soft blue light. Vextal's breathing apparatus wheezed as he adjusted the ancient device that kept him alive. Battle damage from the war had left his respiratory system barely functional, but he endured. He always endured. "Commander," spoke a nervous Aquarian officer, her gills fluttering with excitement, "is it true you fought alongside the humans in the final campaign?" The cantina grew quiet. Other patrons, hardened veterans and space traders alike, turned their attention toward the corner booth. The name human still carried weight in these sectors, even 3 years after the war's end. Vextal's compound eyes focused on the young officer. "Alongside them?" His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Child, I spent 30 years trying to kill them before I understood what they truly were." He reached for his drink with his remaining natural arm, the synthetic alcohol burning as it went down. "You want to know about the humans? Very well, but understand this. Every story I tell, you happened exactly as I describe. I've seen enough death to know the difference between legend and truth." The veteran's scarred hide bore the marks of plasma burns, blade cuts, and projectile wounds. Each one had a story, but tonight he would tell them about Crimson Ridge. It was the 3rd year of the Human Coalition War, he began, his voice carrying the weight of decades. "My battalion was part of the 47th Siege Division, tasked with eliminating a human forward base on Kepler 442c. The planet was nothing special. Red sand, twin suns, gravity that would crush most beings if they weren't careful." A young Trilaxian engineer leaned forward. "How many humans were stationed there?" 5,000. Elite soldiers, but cut off from their supply lines for 6 months. No food shipments, no ammunition resupply, no reinforcements coming. Our intelligence said they were eating emergency rations and melting ice from the polar caps for water. Vextal's clawed finger traced invisible patterns on the metal table. Command estimated they had maybe 3 days of fight left in them. The crystalline lieutenant's body shimmered with interest. "But they didn't surrender?" "Surrender?" Vextal's laugh was harsh. "We had 50,000 troops surrounding their position, orbital bombardment platforms, siege mechs, chemical weapons, everything the coalition could throw at them. Our propaganda broadcasts promised mercy if they laid down arms. Their response was to increase their perimeter patrols." He paused, remembering. "That's when I first encountered Captain Lee Jun-ho. Human male, average height, wearing armor that had seen better. Decades. Nothing impressive about him until you looked at his eyes. They held something I'd never seen in any species, absolute certainty." The cantina had grown completely silent now. Even the background hum of the station's life support systems seemed muted. The captain walked out of their compound carrying a white flag, but not the way you'd expect. He wasn't hunched over in defeat or trembling with fear. He moved like he owned the battlefield, like our 50,000 soldiers were merely an inconvenience. Vextal's mechanical arm whirred as he gestured. Our commander, General Crux, met him halfway between the lines. I was close enough to hear their conversation through my comm implant. Lee Jun-ho spoke perfect galactic standard, better than most native speakers, a Vorthan cadet interrupted. "What did he say?" He said, "General, I propose single combat between champions. Winner takes all. If your champion defeats ours, we surrender unconditionally. If our champion wins, you allow us safe passage off this planet." Nervous laughter rippled through the gathered officers. The idea of 5,000 surrounded humans negotiating terms seemed absurd. General Crux was so amused, he agreed immediately. We had Throck the Destroyer with us, 7 feet of pure destruction. Cybernetic enhancements, subdermal armor plating, reaction times boosted beyond natural limits. He'd killed champions from 17 different species in ritual combat. Vextal's eyes grew distant. The human sent a medic named Kim Da-un. She couldn't have weighed more than 60 kilograms, wore standard infantry armor that looked like it had been repaired a dozen times. When she stepped into the combat circle, Throck actually laughed. The veteran's voice dropped to almost a whisper. The duel lasted exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds. I know because I was recording it for the victory archives. He stood slowly, his damaged body protesting the movement. Kim Da-un moved like nothing I'd ever seen. When Throck swung his warhammer, she wasn't there. When he fired his plasma cannon, she'd already circled behind him. Every attack he made hit empty air while she danced around him, like gravity didn't apply to her species. The ethereal being pulsed brighter with excitement. How did she defeat him? She didn't just defeat him. She made it look effortless. While Throck exhausted himself with massive swings and energy blasts, she waited for her moment. One precise strike with her monoblade, right through the gap in his neck plating. Throck the Destroyer collapsed like a broken machine. Vextal sat back down heavily. But that wasn't what shook me. As Kim Da-un helped our medics stabilize Throck's wounds, she looked directly at me and said, "I hope he recovers fully. No one should die for a commander's pride." The cantina erupted in murmurs of disbelief. Showing mercy to a defeated enemy was considered weakness in most military cultures. Per the agreement, we had to let them go. 5,000 human soldiers walked out of that canyon in perfect formation, singing some ancient battle hymn that echoed off the canyon walls. Each one saluted Kim Da-un as they passed her position. Vextal's voice grew softer. That's when I realized we weren't fighting ordinary soldiers. We were fighting something far more dangerous, a species that treated warfare like a family protecting their home. They didn't just fight for territory or resources, they fought for each other. The young officers sat in stunned silence, processing the implications of what they'd heard. "Commander," the Aquarian officer asked quietly, "what happened to Kim?" "Sergeant." Vextal's compound eyes focused on something beyond the cantina walls. "That young officer is a story for tomorrow night, but I will tell you this. By the war's end, she had saved more coalition soldiers than she had killed, including me." Word had spread through the corridors and docking bays of Nexus Station like wildfire. The old Zephyrian commander who told impossible stories about human warriors was back in the cantina. By the second evening, the small drinking establishment couldn't contain the crowd that had gathered to hear Vextal speak. Station security had to expand the seating area into the adjacent cargo bay, installing temporary lighting and sound amplifiers. Beings from across the galaxy filled every available space. Seasoned mercenaries sat beside curious diplomats, while young cadets squeezed between grizzled freighter captains. The air recycling systems worked overtime to accommodate the mixed atmospheric requirements of dozens of different species. Vextal surveyed the crowd with his compound eyes, noting faces he recognized from the previous night, alongside many newcomers. A group of hegemony officers sat in the back, their purple skin marked with the ritual scars of their warrior caste. Even they had come to hear about their former enemies. "Tonight," Vextal announced, his voice carrying clearly through the amplification system, "I'll tell you about the siege of Europa Station, a story that changed how every species in this galaxy thinks about the word impossible." The massive crowd settled into expectant silence. Europa Station had been a major news event during the war. 12 million beings of various species living and working on the massive orbital platform around Jupiter's moon. When the hegemony declared it a military target, the evacuation became the largest humanitarian crisis in recorded galactic history. Europa Station was more than just a civilian outpost, Vextal continued, his mechanical breathing apparatus clicking rhythmically. It was a symbol of interspecies cooperation. Humans, Aquarians, Trilaxians, even some of our own Zephyrian families called it home. When the hegemony blockade fleet arrived, they gave the station 48 hours to surrender or face total destruction. A middle-aged Aquarian trader raised her webbed hand. "Commander, I remember the news broadcasts. They said evacuation was impossible with so many civilians." "The mathematics were simple," Vextal replied. 12 million beings, and the only evacuation fleet in range consisted of 73 ships, with a combined capacity of maybe 800,000 passengers. Even if they could make multiple trips, the hegemony fleet would never allow it. He paused, letting his words sink in. That's when the human evacuation coordinator, Lieutenant Nam Hyun-woo, proved that humans don't understand the meaning of the word impossible. The veteran's scarred hide shifted as he leaned forward. Nam Hyun-woo commanded the transport vessel, Harmony's Dream, a civilian cargo hauler that had been converted for refugee transport. The ship was already damaged from a previous engagement. Hull breaches sealed with emergency patches, main engines running at 60% capacity, life support systems failing every few hours. A young Trilaxian engineer called out, how many could his ship carry? 2,000 beings maximum. But Nam Hyun-woo looked at those 12 million civilians and made a decision that defied every principle of military logistics. Vextal's voice grew stronger. Instead of accepting defeat, he did something unprecedented in galactic warfare. The commander activated a holographic display that materialized above the crowd. He sent an open transmission on all frequencies, military, civilian, commercial, even pirate channels. The message was simple. Anyone who helped evacuate Europa Station's civilians would receive the exact coordinates of 3 hidden hegemony supply depots. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Hegemony supply depot locations were among the most closely guarded military secrets in the galaxy. A single depot contained enough weapons, fuel, and provisions to supply entire battle fleets for months. The intelligence was real, Vextal confirmed. Nam Hyun-woo had served as a reconnaissance officer before transferring to civilian evacuation duties. During a deep space mission, his team had discovered the depot locations but never had the opportunity to act on the information. A scarred Vorthan mercenary laughed harshly. And pirates actually believed him? Within 6 hours, over 300 ships had arrived at Europa Station. Cargo haulers, mining barges, luxury cruise vessels, smuggler craft, even decommissioned military transports. Every captain who could push their engines to Jupiter's orbit came looking for those coordinates. The holographic display shifted, showing a massive collection of mismatched vessels surrounding the elegant curves of Europa Station. But coordinates were worthless if the evacuation failed. Nam Hyun-woo knew he needed more than just ships. He needed organization. Vextal's mechanical arm whirred as he gestured toward the display. That's where Communications Officer Park Soo-jin became the most important human in the Jupiter system. She was 26 years old, fresh from the Naval Academy, with a specialty in multi-species coordination protocols. What did she do? Asked the crystalline officer from the previous night. She created something that had never existed before. A real-time coordination network linking over 300 ships with completely different communication systems, navigation protocols, and command structures. Vextal's voice filled with admiration. In 12 hours, she established traffic control patterns, resource allocation schedules, and defensive positions for the most diverse fleet in galactic history. The display showed streams of data flowing between ships, with Park Soo-jin's position at the center of a complex web of communications. She worked for 72 hours straight, surviving on stimulants and determination. Every few hours, her ship's life support would fail and the crew would have to perform emergency repairs, while she continued coordinating the evacuation from a backup station. A young ethereal being pulsed with curiosity. How did they manage to evacuate so many beings so quickly? Park Soo-jin implemented what she called the Cascade Protocol, Vextal explained. Instead of each ship making individual trips, she created a continuous chain of vessels. While one group loaded passengers, another group was already departing, and a third group was returning from safe zones. The evacuation never stopped. The holographic display came alive with moving ships, showing the elegant dance of the evacuation fleet. But the real genius was in the details. She matched ship capabilities with passenger needs. Aquarian families went to vessels with proper water recycling. Trilaxian elderly were assigned to ships with compatible atmospheric processors. Zephyrian younglings were placed on vessels with appropriate artificial gravity settings. It was like watching a master conductor leading an orchestra of chaos. Vextal continued. Every few minutes new complications arose. Engine failures, navigation errors, communication breakdowns, medical emergencies. Park Soo-jin handled them, all while coordinating with Nam Hyun-woo to maintain the overall evacuation timeline. The crowd listened in fascination as Vextal described the massive logistical operation. By the third day, when hegemony forces finally arrived expecting to find a helpless civilian station, they discovered something that violated every military manual in existence. His voice dropped to an ominous whisper. 312. Ships arranged in perfect defensive formation, with Europa Station at the center, like a protected queen surrounded by her loyal guards. The pirates, smugglers, and merchants had transformed themselves into a coordinated military fleet. A hegemony. Officer in the back called out, "What happened when your forces engaged them?" Vextal's compound eyes focused on the purple-skinned warrior. The hegemony fleet demanded immediate surrender. Nam Hyun-woo's response became legendary throughout the galaxy. The veteran activated an audio recording, and Nam Hyun-woo's calm voice filled the cargo bay. "Hegemony fleet, this is Lieutenant Nam Hyun-woo commanding the Europa evacuation fleet. We have 11.8 million civilians aboard our vessels, with final evacuation procedures currently underway. You have two choices. Allow us to complete our humanitarian mission, or engage a fleet that includes 47 armed merchantmen, 12 converted military vessels, and 85 ships whose captains have nothing left to lose." The recording continued. "I should mention that we've already transmitted the promised coordinates to every vessel in our fleet. Even if you destroy us, 300 captains now know where your supply depots are located. Choose wisely." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. The idea of a damaged human transport vessel threatening an entire hegemony battle fleet seemed absurd, but the logic was undeniable. "The hegemony commander chose to engage," Vextal said grimly. But Park Soo-jin had spent 3 days preparing for that moment. The merchant fleet scattered in predetermined patterns, using Europa Station's orbital mechanics to create a defensive maze. While hegemony forces chased cargo haulers through Jupiter's radiation belts, the final evacuation ships slipped away towards safe space. The holographic display showed the chaotic battle, with smaller vessels darting between massive warships like insects around giants. The humans lost 37 ships during the engagement, including Harmony's Dream, but they saved 11,900,000 civilians. "What happened to Nam Hyun-woo and Park Soo-jin?" asked the Aquarian trader. Vextal's voice grew soft with respect. "Their ship was the last to leave Europa Station. As hegemony forces closed in, Nam Hyun-woo ordered his crew to abandon ship, while he manually piloted Harmony's Dream through the enemy formation, drawing fire away from the final evacuation vessels. Park Soo-jin refused to leave her communication station. The last transmission from their ship was Nam Hyun-woo singing an ancient human lullaby, while Park Soo-jin coordinated the final escape routes for the surviving evacuation fleet." The cargo bay fell completely silent. Even the hardened mercenaries seemed moved by the story. The hegemony forces stopped firing, Vextal continued. Every ship in both fleets listened, as those two humans sang together while their vessel broke apart around them. The song was called Arirang, something about mountains and longing for home. He stood slowly, his damaged frame creaking with the effort. 12 million beings from dozens of species are alive today because two humans decided that impossible was just another word for hasn't been done yet. That's what made them so dangerous in war and so valuable in peace. The crowd began to disperse slowly, many beings still discussing what they'd heard. As Vextal prepared to leave, the hegemony officer approached him. "Commander," the purple-skinned warrior said quietly, "that evacuation cost us the war. When 300 ship captains attacked our supply depots simultaneously, our entire logistical network collapsed within weeks." Vextal's compound eyes studied the former enemy. "And what did you learn from that defeat?" The hegemony officer was quiet for a long moment. "That humans don't fight wars, they solve problems, and sometimes the solution requires them to die." Singing. By the third evening, news of Vextal's stories had reached the highest levels of station command. Ambassadors from 6 different species sat in the front rows, while military analysts recorded every word. The atmosphere felt different. Tonight, heavier, more solemn. Even the usual background chatter of the cantina had died away completely. Vextal entered without his usual ceremonial armor, wearing only the simple grey uniform of a retired officer. But it was when he slowly removed his helmet that gasps echoed through the crowd. Deep scars crisscrossed his cranium like a road map. Of pain, while patches of synthetic skin covered areas where his natural hide had been completely destroyed. "Terminus 7, he announced quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made even the most hardened veterans lean forward. "The bloodiest battle of the entire war. 50,000 coalition forces against 20,000 human defenders in a fight that lasted 11 days and changed everything I believed about warfare." A young Aquarian medical officer raised her webbed hand nervously. "Commander, the report said chemical weapons were used there. Is that true?" Vextal's compound eyes dimmed with memory. "Nerve gas, codenamed Crimson Death by our chemical warfare division. It was designed specifically to target the neural pathways of non-human species while leaving humans completely unaffected." His scarred fingers traced the patterns on his skull. "The irony wasn't lost on me when I found myself dying from a weapon created by the very beings I was trying to kill." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Chemical warfare was considered barbaric by most galactic civilizations, though technically legal under the wartime conventions. "The gas deployment happened on the 7th day of the siege," Vextal continued. "My reconnaissance unit was advancing through the industrial sector when our own artillery opened fire with chemical shells. The plan was simple: saturate the human defensive positions, then send in ground forces to mop up any survivors." He activated a small holographic projector, showing the devastated landscape of Terminus 7. Twisted metal structures rose from cratered ground like the bones of some massive beast, while toxic clouds drifted between the ruins. But something went wrong with the wind patterns. A sudden atmospheric shift pushed the gas cloud directly into our advanced positions. Vextal's breathing apparatus wheezed as he recalled the moment. 73 soldiers in my unit started convulsing simultaneously. The gas attacked our nervous systems like liquid fire, shutting down motor functions, while keeping us conscious enough to feel every second of the process. A Trilaxian engineer looked horrified. "Your own forces used chemical weapons against you?" Command didn't know. The gas was invisible, odorless, and our communication equipment had been damaged by the initial bombardment. From their perspective, we had simply stopped reporting in. Vextal's mechanical arm clicked as he gestured. I watched my soldiers die one by one, their bodies betraying them while their minds remained trapped inside failing flesh. The veteran's voice grew quieter. I was the last one still moving when the convulsions finally took me. My vision was fading, my limbs refusing to obey commands, when I heard something impossible: footsteps approaching through the toxic fog. "Human footsteps?" asked a crystalline officer. "Field Medic Choi Min-seo, 3rd Medical Battalion, Human Colonial Defense Force." Vextal spoke her name like a prayer. She was 28 years old, barely 5 feet tall, wearing a medical corps uniform that was 3 sizes too big for her. But she moved through that poisoned hellscape like death itself couldn't touch her. The holographic display shifted to show a small figure in protective gear navigating through the chemical fog. She found me convulsing in a blast crater, surrounded by the bodies of my dead squad members. Her scanner would have immediately identified me as Zephyrian, enemy forces. "Did she try to capture you?" asked a hegemony intelligence officer. Vextal's laugh was bitter. She dropped her weapon and started treating my symptoms immediately. When I asked her later why she hadn't just left me to die, she said something that still haunts me. "Because that's what doctors do." The crowd listened in fascination as he described the next 6 hours. Choi Min-seo dragged me to a partially collapsed building that offered some protection from the ongoing artillery bombardment. My nervous system was shutting down, but she had brought antidotes designed for treating humans accidentally exposed to their own chemical weapons. "But you're not human," pointed out a young Vorthan cadet. "How could human antidotes work on your biology?" They couldn't, not completely, but Choi Min-seo had studied alien physiology during her medical training. She modified the dosages and combined different compounds, essentially inventing new treatments while explosions shook the building around us. Vextal's eyes grew distant. She worked for 6 hours straight, monitoring my vital signs with equipment that was never designed for Zephyrian biology. The veteran's voice softened with remembered gratitude. But it wasn't just the medical treatment that saved me. As she worked, she talked constantly, told me about her home city, Seoul, about rivers that ran clean and mountains covered in green forests. She described her family, parents who ran a small restaurant, a younger brother studying to be a teacher. "Why did she do that?" asked the Aquarian medical officer. She said human patients recovered faster when they had something beautiful to focus on instead of their pain. So she shared her memories of Earth with an enemy soldier who was trying to kill her people. Vextal's breathing apparatus clicked rapidly. When I couldn't stop shaking from the nerve damage, she gave me her water ration. When I asked why she was saving an enemy, she explained the human concept of the Hippocratic Oath. The holographic display showed ancient text in multiple languages. First, do no harm. Treat every patient with dignity and respect. Save every life you can, regardless of species, regardless of politics, regardless of which side they fight for. Vextal's voice carried reverence. She told me that human doctors swear this oath when they begin practicing medicine and that it supersedes military orders, personal beliefs, even threats to their own lives. A hegemony officer in the back called out skeptically, "Commander, with respect, one medic treating one enemy soldier doesn't represent an entire species." Vextal's compound eyes focused on the purple-skinned warrior. "You're right, so let me tell you what happened next." The holographic display shifted, showing the wider battlefield. While Choi Min-seo was treating me, the chemical weapons had affected both human and coalition forces. Gas clouds don't respect battle lines. 3 days later, when I was stable enough to move, she left me with enough medical supplies for a week and went back into the combat zone. Not to fight, to treat wounded soldiers from both sides. His voice grew heavy with sorrow. That's where she died, in a minefield between our positions, trying to reach a wounded Trilaxian engineer who had been calling for help for hours. The cargo bay fell completely silent. Even the station's life support systems seemed to quiet in respect. The minefield was clearly marked, Vextal continued. Both armies knew it was there. Both armies could hear the wounded engineer crying for help, but military protocol forbade rescue attempts in such dangerous areas. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Choi Min-seo went anyway, a young ethereal being pulsed with anguish. Did she save him? She stabilized his injuries and was guiding him back to safety when she stepped on an anti-personnel mine. The explosion killed her instantly, but her final act was to push the Trilaxian clear of the blast radius. He survived and is now a medical researcher developing better trauma treatments for multi-species conflicts. Vextal stood slowly, his damaged frame testament to the story he was telling. Before she left to attempt that rescue, Choi Min-seo gave me something that changed my understanding of warfare forever. He reached into his uniform and withdrew a small, worn book. Her personal copy of the Hippocratic Oath, translated into 47 different languages. The book passed through the crowd, beings of various species examining the simple text that had guided one human's actions in the midst of hell. She had handwritten notes in the margins, Vextal explained, reminders to herself about treating different alien physiologies, cultural considerations for various species, even recipes for foods that could provide comfort to homesick patients. That's when I started questioning everything Command had told us about humans being monsters, he admitted. How could a species capable of creating weapons designed to cause maximum suffering also produce individuals who would die to save their enemies? A scarred Vorthan mercenary spoke up. Commander, what happened to you after she died? I spent 3 weeks recovering in that collapsed building, reading her notes and thinking about what she had taught me. When coalition forces finally found me, I requested a transfer to medical support duties. Vextal's voice grew stronger. I spent the rest of the war helping treat wounded soldiers from all species, using techniques Choi Min-seo had shown me. The veteran's mechanical arm whirred as he retrieved the book. After the war ended, I traveled to Earth to meet her parents. They welcomed me into their restaurant, fed me traditional Korean food, and showed me photographs of their daughter. Growing up, they never once asked why I had been fighting against their people. What did they say when you told them their daughter had saved you? Asked the crystalline officer. Vextal's compound eyes brightened. Her father said, Minseo always brought home wounded animals as a child. Birds with broken wings, cats with injured paws. Her mother and I knew she would grow up to heal the world. Then her mother added, We're glad she was able to help you. That's how we know she died happy. The crowd sat in stunned silence, processing the implications of parents who could forgive their daughter's killer and welcome him as family. Choi Min-seo taught me that true strength isn't measured by how much destruction you can cause, but by how much healing you can provide. Vextal's voice carried across the cargo bay like a benediction. Every human I encountered after that carried the same capacity for compassion, even in the midst of the most brutal warfare our galaxy has ever seen. As the crowd began to disperse, many beings approached Vextal with questions about human medical techniques, requests for copies of the Hippocratic Oath, and stories of their own encounters with human healing. The Aquarian medical officer waited, until last. Commander, she said quietly, I've been treating war veterans for 5 years, and I've never heard of humans sharing advanced medical knowledge with their enemies during active combat. Is that really what happened? Vextal's scarred features arranged themselves into something that might have been a smile. Young officer, tomorrow night I'll tell you about the defense of New Busan, where human forces broadcast medical frequencies to help coalition medics treat their own wounded. You'll learn that Choi Min-seo wasn't unique among her people. She was simply typical. Station Commander Velkresh personally escorted Vextal to the main amphitheater on the 4th night. Word of the veteran's stories had reached the highest levels of galactic government, and representatives from 12 different species councils had arrived to hear his testimony. The massive circular chamber, normally used for diplomatic ceremonies, had been hastily converted into an auditorium with seating for over 5,000 beings. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the amphitheater as Vextal made his way to the central speaking platform. His damaged frame looked small against the towering walls, but when he activated the voice amplification system, every word carried to the farthest reaches of the chamber. Tonight, I will tell you about the defense of New Busan, he began, his scarred face illuminated by the holographic projectors. The final human stronghold before Earth fell, and the battle that taught us the difference between conquering and winning. The massive crowd settled into expectant silence. New Busan had been the subject of countless military studies since the war's end, but no one had ever heard a first-hand account from the coalition forces who participated in the siege. New Busan was humanity's last major colony outside their home system, Vextal continued, his mechanical breathing apparatus clicking in the amplified silence. 3 million civilians, protected by exactly 800 human marines under the command of General Yoon Jae-hyuk. A holographic display materialized above the platform, showing the sprawling cityscape of New Busan before the siege. Elegant, towers reached toward alien skies, while maglev trains connected residential districts to industrial complexes. It looked like a paradise built among the stars. When our fleet arrived with 40,000 ground troops, we expected the usual human response: evacuate the civilians and make us fight for every building. Instead, General Yoon broadcast a message that confused our entire command structure. Vextal activated an audio recording, and a calm human voice filled the amphitheater. Coalition forces, this is General Yoon Jae-hyuk, commanding the New Busan Defense Force. We have received your surrender demands and respectfully decline. However, we invite you to join us for our morning concerts. Broadcasting on frequency 447.2, we'll be performing selections from our Planetary Symphony Orchestra. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. The idea of defenders inviting attackers to listen to music seemed absurd. Our intelligence officers assured us it was psychological warfare, Vextal explained. Command ordered the communications blackout, but curiosity got the better of many soldiers. That first morning, hundreds of coalition troops tuned in to frequency 447.2. The veterans' compound eyes grew distant with memory. What we heard defied every principle of military psychology, a full orchestra performing something called Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, followed by a children's choir singing traditional Korean folk songs. The music was so beautiful that soldiers in the front lines stopped shooting to listen. A young Trilaxian officer called out, "Commander, was this part of their defensive strategy?" That's what we thought initially. But as the siege continued, we realized the broadcasts weren't aimed at us. They were for the human defenders and civilian population. The music was keeping their morale high during the bombardment. Vextal's voice carried a note of admiration. Every morning at dawn, every evening at sunset, and during the worst of the fighting, they broadcast music from Earth. The holographic display shifted to show the siege lines surrounding New Busan. Massive coalition artillery positions formed a ring around the city, while orbital bombardment platforms maintained continuous fire on military targets. General Yoon had divided his 800 Marines into what he called phantom companies, Vextal continued. Sergeant Major Han Ji-won, his tactical coordinator, had turned the entire city into a three-dimensional battlefield. They used the subway tunnels like blood vessels, moving troops instantly from one sector to another. The display showed cross-sections of the city's underground infrastructure. New Busan had been built with extensive tunnel networks for weather, protection and transportation. Han Ji-won weaponized the entire system, creating firing positions that could appear anywhere in the city within minutes. A scarred Vorthan mercenary leaned forward. How did they coordinate such complex movements with so few troops? Each Marine was equipped with advanced communication implants that allowed instantaneous coordination. But the real genius was in tele-tactical flexibility, Vextal explained. Instead of holding fixed positions, they flowed like water through the city's infrastructure. Attack the industrial district, and they'd hit your supply lines from the residential areas. Shell the government buildings, and they'd emerge from the university sector. The veteran's mechanical arm whirred as he gestured toward the display. For 96 days, 800 human Marines held off 40,000 coalition troops, backed by orbital fire support. Not through superior firepower, but through perfect coordination and unbreakable will. What was the turning point? Asked a hegemony strategic analyst. Vextal's voice grew heavy. Day 73. Our forces had finally identified the main command bunker beneath the city center. We concentrated all our artillery on that single position for 18 hours straight. The bombardment was so intense that it registered on seismic monitors 3 systems away. The holographic display showed the devastating barrage, with energy beams and projectiles hammering a single point until the surrounding buildings were reduced to molten slag. When the bombardment stopped, we expected silence. Instead, we heard singing. Vextal activated another audio file, and haunting human voices filled the amphitheater. General Yoon and his surviving staff were singing an ancient Korean song called Arirang from their damaged bunker, broadcast on all frequencies. The melody was heartbreakingly beautiful, carrying notes of longing and determination that transcended language barriers. Several beings in the audience wiped away tears as the song continued. The translation was simple, Vextal explained as, "The music faded. Arirang Hill is steep, but we will climb it together. The path is difficult, but we will not walk alone." They were telling us that destruction of their bodies wouldn't break their spirits. A crystalline diplomat pulsed with curiosity. How did your forces respond to this psychological warfare? It wasn't psychological warfare, Vextal corrected firmly. It was something far more dangerous. It was truth. Those humans were sharing their culture with us even as we tried to destroy them. Our soldiers started requesting transfers rather than continue the assault. How do you attack beings who respond to your violence with beauty? The veteran's scarred features showed deep emotion. By day 80, we were receiving reports of coalition troops laying down weapons and refusing orders. The music broadcasts had demoralized our forces more effectively than any military strategy. What happened during the final assault? Asked an Aquarian military historian. Vextal's breathing apparatus wheezed as he recalled the moment. Day 96. Our orbital platforms had finally depleted the city's power grid, and the music broadcasts stopped. Command ordered the final assault, expecting to find the survivors weakened and ready to surrender. The holographic display showed coalition forces advancing through the ruined streets of New Busan. expecting to find scattered resistance. Instead, they encountered something that changed the course of galactic warfare forever. The humans had saved their ammunition for the final battle. Every approach to the command bunker was perfectly covered by overlapping fields of fire. They had turned the ruins into a fortress that channeled our forces into predetermined killing zones. Vextal's voice carried professional respect. Sergeant Major Han Ji-won had spent 3 months turning rubble into the most effective defensive position in military history. But they were outnumbered 50-1, protested a young ethereal observer. Numbers meant nothing in those tunnels. The humans knew every inch of their city, while we were stumbling through unfamiliar terrain. They had prepared fallback positions, supply caches and escape routes that let them fight a running battle through the underground networks. Vextal's compound eyes gleamed with remembered admiration. For 6 hours, 800 Marines held off our entire assault force. The veteran's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the amphitheater. The siege only ended when they ran out of ammunition. As our forces finally breached the command bunker, we found General Yoon Jae-hyuk standing, alone in the center of the chamber, completely unarmed. Was he trying to surrender? Asked a coalition intelligence officer. He was singing, Vextal replied simply. The same song we'd been hearing for 96 days, Arirang. His voice echoed through the bunker as our soldiers surrounded him, and he died with a smile on his face. The amphitheater fell into absolute silence as the implications sank in. A human general had chosen to face death while sharing his culture with his enemies. That's when we realized we hadn't won anything, Vextal continued. We had destroyed a city, killed 800 brave soldiers, and traumatized 3 million civilians. But we had also learned that humans would rather die singing than live in defeat. The holographic display showed the aftermath of the siege, coalition forces standing among the ruins, many of them visibly shaken by what they had witnessed. Victory felt like defeat that day, Vextal admitted. Our soldiers had nightmares about the music. Command received thousands of requests for transfer to non-combat duties. The defense of New Busan broke something in our army that never fully healed. A middle-aged Zephyrian officer asked quietly, "Commander, what happened to the civilian population?" They were evacuated to refugee camps, but something strange occurred during the transport. Coalition soldiers kept giving them personal items, food rations, medical supplies, even family photographs as gestures of respect. Vextal's mechanical arm clicked. Our troops had been so moved by the human broadcasts that they couldn't treat the survivors as enemies. "Did the music broadcasts continue on other human worlds?" asked the Trilaxian officer. Vextal's scarred features arranged into something resembling a smile. Every human colony we attacked after New Busan started broadcasting music during the siege. Symphony orchestras, folk singers, children's choirs. They all sang while we tried to destroy them. By the end of the war, coalition forces were requesting to listen to the broadcasts instead of jamming them. As the crowd began to disperse, a young hegemony cadet approached the platform. "Commander, did General Yoon's sacrifice accomplish anything?" "Young soldier, the defense of New Busan changed everything. When news of the siege reached Earth, humanity's government made a decision that ended the war." Vextal's voice carried across the emptying amphitheater. "Tomorrow night I'll tell you about that decision and why it taught us that humans had been trying to save us all along." The veteran looked out over the departing crowd, many of them humming the melody of Arirang as they walked away. "Sometimes," he said to himself, "the most powerful weapon is a song that refuses to be silenced." The final night transformed Nexus Station into something unprecedented in galactic history. Every available space had been converted to accommodate the massive crowd that had gathered to hear Vextal's conclusion. The main amphitheater overflowed into adjacent cargo bays, connected by live holographic feeds that allowed beings throughout the station to witness what many were calling the most important testimony since the war's end. Representatives from every major species council occupied the front rows, while military historians activated recording equipment to preserve every word. The Galactic Broadcasting Network had received permission to transmit the session across 17 star systems, reaching an estimated audience of 12 billion beings. Vextal entered the amphitheater without fanfare, his scarred frame moving slowly toward the central platform. The massive crowd fell silent as he approached the speaking position, the weight of expectation pressing down like a physical force. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, yet somehow it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "The fall of Earth," he began, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. "The day we learned the truth about humanity and discovered that everything we thought we knew about war was wrong." The holographic display is activated, showing the blue-green marble of humanity's homeworld suspended in the darkness of space. Earth looked peaceful from orbit, its white clouds swirling over continents that had birthed a species capable of both incredible compassion and devastating warfare. "Our fleet approached Earth expecting the greatest battle in galactic history," Vextal continued, his compound eyes reflecting the planet's image. 47 dreadnoughts, 300 support vessels, and over 2 million coalition troops, prepared for a siege that would dwarf even New Busan. A Trilaxian military analyst leaned forward. "What were Earth's defenses like?" "Formidable. Orbital defense platforms that could vaporize entire fleets, planetary shields powered by the planet's core, weapon systems we'd never encountered before." The holographic display showed the impressive array of defensive installations surrounding Earth. "Our tactical computers calculated the assault would take 6 months and cost us half our fleet." Vextal's breathing apparatus clicked rhythmically as he paused. "But when our forces moved into attack formation, something impossible happened. Earth's defenses powered down. Every weapon system, every shield generator, every orbital platform simply shut off. Shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. The idea of a planet voluntarily disarming in the face of invasion violated every principle of military strategy. Fleet Command assumed it was a trap," Vextal explained. "We held position for 6 hours, waiting for some hidden weapon to reveal itself. Instead, we received a transmission from Earth's surface. President Oh Se-hun requested permission to speak directly with our fleet commander. The veteran activated an audio recording, and a calm human voice filled the amphitheater. "Coalition Fleet, this is President Oh Se-hun of the United Earth Government. I know you've come to destroy our world, and I won't insult your intelligence by pretending we can stop you. Instead, I'd like to offer you something that might be more valuable than victory." "A surrender offer?" asked a hegemony diplomatic observer. "No," Vextal replied firmly. "A gift. The most incredible gift one species has ever offered another." The holographic display exploded into a complex web of scientific data, technological specifications, and research findings. Complete blueprints for faster-than-light travel that was 50% more efficient than anything we possessed. Medical treatments for diseases that had plagued our species for millennia. Clean energy solutions that could power entire star systems without environmental damage. A young ethereal being pulsed with disbelief. "They gave you their technology while you were preparing to invade them." "Not just technology, knowledge." Vextal's voice carried a note of wonder that hadn't diminished even after 3 years. "Agricultural techniques that could transform dead worlds into gardens. Environmental restoration methods that could heal ecosystems destroyed by industrial development. Social organization theories that could eliminate poverty and inequality." The crowd sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. The humans had voluntarily shared the accumulated knowledge of their entire civilization with beings who had come to destroy them. "But that wasn't even the most shocking revelation," Vextal continued. "Dr. Kang Hye-jin, Earth's lead scientific coordinator, broadcast a message that changed everything we thought we knew about the war." Another audio file began playing, and a woman's voice filled the amphitheater. "Coalition forces, my name is Dr. Kang Hye-jin. For the past 40 years, I've been coordinating humanity's xenological research programs. I want you to understand what you've been fighting against and why we've been so determined to protect our colonies." The holographic display shifted to show peaceful human settlements across dozens of worlds. But as the image focused, it became clear these weren't ordinary colonies. "Every human settlement you attacked was primarily a research station," Dr. Kang's voice continued. "We weren't expanding for territory or resources. We were studying local ecosystems, alien biology, and environmental conditions to develop restoration techniques for worlds damaged by industrial exploitation. Vextal's mechanical arm whirred as he gestured toward the display. New Harmony wasn't a mining colony. It was an ecological research facility developing techniques to heal planets stripped bare by resource extraction. The Kepler settlements weren't military outposts. They were agricultural research stations creating crops that could grow in alien soil. A crystalline observer shimmered with confusion. But your forces encountered significant military resistance at every human colony. Because they were defending 40 years of research that could benefit every species in the galaxy, Vextal explained. Every military base we attacked was also a medical facility developing treatments for species-specific diseases. Every weapon factory was producing environmental restoration equipment. The veteran's voice grew heavy with regret. We spent 30 years fighting a species that was trying to save us all, and we were too blinded by our own propaganda to see it. Dr. Kang's message continued. We know many of your worlds are dying from industrial pollution, resource depletion, and ecological collapse. We've been developing solutions not because we wanted to sell them to you, but because we believe every species deserves to live in a healthy environment. The holographic display showed before and after images of restored ecosystems, species brought back from extinction, and polluted worlds transformed into gardens. This is what humanity had been working toward for 4 decades, Vextal said quietly. Not conquest, but healing. A Zephyrian council member called out, Commander, if their intentions were peaceful, why didn't they simply contact our governments directly? They tried, Vextal replied. For 20 years, human diplomats attempted to establish formal contact with coalition leadership. Every embassy was rejected. Every communication was ignored. Every peace offering was dismissed as a trick. His compound eyes dimmed with sadness. We were so convinced that humans were expansionist conquerors that we refused to listen when they tried to explain their true purpose. The audio recording shifted to a new voice, Captain Ryutei-O broadcasting from Earth's surface as coalition bombardment began. Coalition forces, this is Captain Ryutei-O, final coordinator of Earth's xenological research programs. As your weapons fall on our world, I want to thank you for one thing. The amphitheater fell completely silent. Thank you for teaching us about the incredible diversity of life in our galaxy. Every species we've encountered, every world we've studied, every being we've met has shown us something new about the universe's capacity for beauty and complexity. We hope our gift of knowledge helps you build a better future for all species. Captain Ryu's voice remained calm, even as explosions echoed in the background. We forgive you for not understanding our intentions. Fear makes it hard to trust, and trust is the most difficult gift to give. But we hope someday you'll use what we've learned to heal the wounds that war has left on all our worlds. Vextal's voice broke as he continued. Those were humanity's final words, not curses or threats or promises of revenge, gratitude and forgiveness. Broadcast as their homeworld burned, the veteran stood slowly, his scarred frame casting long shadows across the platform. We came to destroy monsters and found angels. The war ended not because we achieved victory, but because we finally understood the magnitude of what we had lost. He raised his prosthetic arm, the synthetic limb gleaming under the amphitheater's lights. This limb uses human technology freely, given in their final transmission. The medicine that saved my organs after the nerve gas exposure came from human research. The peace treaty that ended the war was written by human diplomats who forgave us even as their civilization died. Every environmental restoration project currently underway in Coalition space uses techniques developed by human scientists. Every medical breakthrough that saved lives across our worlds came from research humanity conducted while we were trying to kill them. The massive crowd listened in absolute silence as Vextal delivered his final testimony. Humanity taught us the greatest lesson in the galaxy, that true strength isn't measured by the ability to destroy, but by the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect and nurture life. His voice carried across the amphitheater like a benediction. They showed us that wisdom isn't about accumulating power, but about using knowledge to heal rather than harm. Vextal's compound eyes swept across the assembled multitude of species that had once been humanity's enemies. We learned too late that humans had been offering us partnership while we demanded their submission. They wanted to share the universe's wonders while we insisted on conquering them. The veteran's breathing apparatus wheezed as he prepared to speak his final words. The greatest tragedy of the human coalition war wasn't the destruction of their worlds or the loss of their lives. It was that we destroyed the one species that could have taught us how to build a galaxy worth living in. The amphitheater erupted in applause that continued for nearly 2 hours. Beings from dozens of species stood and cheered, many weeping, openly for a people they had never properly understood. When the ovation finally died down, Vextal spoke one last time. Remember this story. Tell it to your children, your students, your leaders. Make sure they understand that humanity may be gone, but their legacy, their gift of compassion and wisdom, must never be forgotten. He paused, looking out over the massive crowd that represented nearly every species in the known galaxy. And, perhaps if we're very fortunate and very wise, we might still have time to become worthy of the friendship they offered us. The old warrior left the platform slowly, his damaged frame disappearing into the crowd of beings who had been forever changed by his words. Behind him, the holographic display continued showing images of restored worlds, healed ecosystems, and species saved from extinction, humanity's true memorial, written in the renewed life of 1,000 worlds. The end.